Are you experiencing adequate rest in your life? That is the question we're going to address on Flourish-Meant today. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. Flourish-Meant is part of the Spark Media Network and can be heard on the Edify app. Today's guest is Melanie Redd. She's an active blogger, author, and speaker. Melanie uses all of her resources, including social media, as a way to encourage others. Her topic centers on hope and rest for your soul. I'm so excited to have you on Flourish-Meant today. Let's talk about why we are discussing this topic of rest anyway right now. Is this more of a need for us to focus on now than ever before?
Absolutely. As we began last year about this time, I began talking with a publisher, and we have young adult children. And one of the things that we were hearing from them and from their friends was this absolute concern over what's going on in the world, anxiety, fear, depression, even some thoughts of suicide. And so we began to think, what could we do that could encourage the hearts of young women? But the more I got into it, the more I thought, this is to encourage the hearts of all women.
So we are experiencing a spike in anxiety and depression and this restlessness, this emptiness, this struggle in the soul right now.
Absolutely. Yes. As I began to study and do some research, the numbers are staggering. The percentage of what I still would call children, 18 to 25-year-olds who are on antidepressants and all kinds of medications is higher than it's ever been. And when you throw in viruses and lack of world peace and the crazy that's all around us, it seems like it's just gone higher. And so maybe we have never been, at least in my lifetime, at a point where people are more nervous and more unsettled, and we see it. It's acted out everywhere. I like to use the example. Growing up, we had these beanbag chairs, and they were these big plastic, colorful beanbag chairs. My brother had one and I had one. And inside were these little bitty plastic beans, and they were sewn together by this stitching. And we would sit on those things and lay on those things and throw those things, but eventually they would form little tears and the beans would start spilling out. And that's what society is starting to look like more and more and more, is a bunch of beanbag chairs with little tears, and there's little tiny plastic beans spilling out of people all over the place.
Wow. So the human beings are all spilling out everywhere. So that is kind of a sad state of affairs that the world is in right now. And I'm seeing that we, even when we're trying to rest, are experiencing a difficulty feeling at rest. Let's talk about what the difference is between sitting still, trying to sleep, and actually experiencing a restfulness.
Oh, that's such a good question. I think that maybe in past days, we actually could sit and be still. But the idea of Psalm 46, where the Bible tells us to be still and know that He is God, that is very hard to do these days. Because even when we're seated or laying down trying to sleep, our minds are always going. And so one of my prayers has been, as I've been doing ministry this last year, especially in writing and speaking, and I've just started a podcast, is to encourage people to find that peace again, that deep stillness, that deep rest. Not that just my body is sitting here, but my mind is going crazy, or I'm laying in the bed, but I'm not at peace. And so I think the word peace comes to mind because there's this sense of complete rest. Perfect peace is the way the Bible describes it. And we can have perfect peace, but we have to get there. And I do think it's harder than it's ever been.
Yes. I think there's more things to take our attention and keep our attention even while we're trying to attend to other things. So we're trying to multitask inside our heads, even when we're not doing those things. We're worrying about those things. We're thinking about what we need to do next and what we need to do tomorrow. And then we can't really wind down and just relax.
That is so true. And I'll tell you, I've been praying and thinking. I was just thinking this morning on making a list for people of some practical ways to rest more. I was talking with a friend about this yesterday. Like, for example, one of the things, especially in this calendar year, that I'm trying to do is to actually have quiet. And I know that sounds crazy, but when you walk, like I like to take walks in the morning. When I walk, I don't play any music. I don't play any podcast. I just walk and enjoy being outside. And it's amazing when you get quiet. in your mind how much thinking you can do. You can ponder, you can dream, you can pray, because there's no competition for your mental capacity. I also am finding I turn the music off when I'm in the car or when I'm getting ready in the morning, and I just have quiet. And it's amazing what stillness will do, or quiet will do, to let you think again. It's like the world becomes a quieter place and your mind can begin to ponder. I think of when Mary found out that she was going to have baby Jesus, she pondered those things in her heart. And I think we've got to get back to that, where we actually give ourselves time to really think and process and pray through the things that are going on in our lives.
It's important to do that without screens on, because the screens are part of the problem.
Oh, yes. Yes, we could do a whole podcast on that.
Yes.
And I will tell you, it's hard because it's a self-discipline. I know on most phones now, there is an option where you can turn off all the notifications. And so I like to do this at night. I will turn the noise off. I will turn the sound off. I will put the phone where I can't see it or hear it. It does have an emergency feature if my family needs to get in touch with me, but it's very freeing to go to sleep with nothing buzzing, no notifications. And you can do that at mealtime. You can do that when you're having your quiet time. And so there's something very freeing about limiting, turning the television off, getting the computer off, turning your phone off, and giving yourself time to breathe.
Yes, we need to be in touch with people, but we don't need to always be in touch with the media and all of those messaging things that are coming in. And a lot of those messages are very negative, and they're intentionally negative because it gets our attention.
Yes, I can remember a day where to talk to someone, you actually had to go to the wall and answer the phone. and a day where the news only came on at like 5 and 10. Now there's news alerts dinging all day long. Nobody needs a news alert every 5 minutes. Nobody needs to be notified all the time of every single thing.
And the negativity of some of those media messages is amplified beyond what it needs to be in order to stir up this sense of anxiety. So we're bombarded with this all the time. And I think young minds are particularly vulnerable to that. Can you talk about why a young person's mind might be more vulnerable to the negativity of the messaging that they're taking in constantly all day and into the night?
Sure. I think about my young people that live with me, and their phones are attached to them pretty much 24/7. And I do think that's a disservice, because no one needs to be contacted 24/7. But I think they're especially susceptible because they have information so ready at hand. Also, I've read that studies show that most children's brains are not completely formed until they're 25. And so when they try to deal with heavy adult world matters, it can be extra challenging. I mean, I feel it as a grown-up, much older than 25. But when our children and when our 20-somethings have to deal with wars and rumors of wars and diseases and scares and all the notifications that constantly are coming at them, I think it just adds to the stress they already feel. They already are stressed out. They're already nervous. They're already anxious. And so when you add in everything else, it's just more than they can take. They don't, as one of my professors in college used to say, they get at a place of disequilibrium, and they have no file folder to file the new information in. And so if they've not experienced it, if they've not lived long enough, if they don't know this too will pass, then when it comes, it's just overwhelming and they don't know what to do with it.
That is so important to understand, because that's true. As a therapist, I will verify that is absolutely true, that the brain is not fully formed until 25. And then for some, it's even later than that, kind of depends on the person. So those messages that they're getting and that constant access to blue screen wavelengths is not neurologically a good thing. It's not emotionally a good thing. And it certainly isn't socially a good thing that they're only connecting online now. So that those are many things that are adding to the anxiety and the depression and the inability to rest for younger people, especially, but also for older people too. It's not good for us either. So let's, when we come back from the break, talk about some ways that we can be proactive at changing our mindsets, changing the way that we receive information and the way that we build health into our lives with good and positive habits. Join Spark Media Network in supporting Samaritan's Purse, which provides international relief services. To learn more or donate, visit SamaritansPurse.org. All right, and we're coming back from the break to talk with Melanie Redd about how to just rest. Melanie, can you give us some practical tips on how we can implement better strategies and habits in our lives for being healthy in our minds, our bodies, and our spirits, and resting in the presence of God?
Sure. I think in a real practical sense, one of the things we can do is just take breaks from all the gadgets. We can turn the screens off when we're having dinner with our family. We can turn the screens off when we go to bed at night. We can turn the screens off in the morning when we need some quiet time. I also really encourage people to begin prayer. Begin praying in your life, whether that's using a prayer journal, whether that's praying. I use index cards and actually write out prayer requests. I tell people you can popcorn prayer, which means you just talk to God all day long. But I encourage people, there is something about looking up to heaven and acknowledging that we have a God and He is in control that completely changes the way we feel about ourselves and about our lives. I also encourage people to get a Bible and open it and begin to read it for yourself. Get a great devotional book. If you've not been reading the Bible, just start simply with the devotional book and one verse a day. There is power in spending time in the Bible. And then another thing I love to encourage, especially women seem to respond to this, is to journal, to get a journal and begin writing with a real pen. There is something very cathartic and freeing about writing down our thoughts, writing out our concerns, writing out our worries. I've seen so many young women, especially benefit when they are holding it all in and they begin to journal it out. They found great freedom in the journaling. And then I encourage you to talk to people about what's going on in your life. Don't keep it all inside. We need community, maybe like we never have before. It will be fascinating to see the studies that they do in the future on what the last 2 or 3 years have done to our society. I know you're a counselor, and so you probably are already thinking about that, but there's something about community that we need and people and just the freedom to be able to express if you're struggling and be able to say to somebody, I'm having a hard time, or I don't like what's happening. There is some great health in admitting that you're struggling.
So important to be able to confess those things out loud to other people and to God so that we are not keeping all of that inside our heads.
Yes, when it gets locked inside and we just stuff it all in there, we're like someone trying to hold something under the water in a swimming pool, like a ball or a volleyball, and you do it long enough and the thing just blasts out. And I'm afraid if we keep it all inside too long, then we end up blasting at someone, getting angry. And maybe that's what we're seeing around us. People are just holding it all in until they can't take it anymore. And so they act out. So I encourage people, find a friend, find one friend you can pray with, one friend you can share with, one friend who is for you and for your family and for your marriage, and just talk to them honestly.
We need to discharge those things so that we can rest, because that'll help us to be able to sleep and feel at peace once we've let all of those things out of our bodies. Otherwise, it manifests itself in physical symptoms and muscle tension and in nightmares and not being able to sleep all the way through the night.
Yes, absolutely. And I will tell you, as we've been doing the research for this new book that's called Just Rest, one of the things that we found as I began to study, they asked me to write about anxiety. And so I looked at every verse in the Bible on fear and anxiety. And I thought, I can't just say, don't be afraid. I'm not going to, for 90 days, don't be afraid. Don't be anxious, because that's only a negative. I needed to give people a positive. And so I had the most fun. This was last summer when I actually wrote the book, looking up all throughout the Old Testament traits and names of God and qualities of God. For example, when you're afraid, knowing He never leaves you. He is always with you. He is right beside you. He sees you. He hears you. He understands what you're going through. And so each devotional is a reminder that we serve someone bigger than us who can take care of us. We serve a great God. And so one of the things that I do think helps in my life, and I'm praying it will help others, is to remember when you're afraid or you're anxious or things are overwhelming, then you look up to heaven. In Psalm 121, it talks about, I look up to heaven where my help comes from. And that's what we do. And we begin to look up and say, there is a God. He loves me. He is for me, and he can help me no matter what I'm feeling.
We invite that praise specifically in the names of God and the characteristics that he's given us in those special names so that we know him better. Then those praises actually counteract the anxiety and worry and fear and all the things that disrupt our rest.
Absolutely. Another thing that I love to do, and I tell women all the time, if you're really struggling with depression, I have a cure and it's free. Now, I'm not saying don't go talk to a counselor, but I started doing this right when all the mess hit. If this was early 2020, as I was praying, it was like God said, you need to praise me. And so I went into the closet. Now I went in my walk-in closet, put my earbuds in, and I turned on praise music really loud, and I just worshiped. And it was amazing. I mean, one song a day completely changed my whole attitude. And it is because I looked up instead of looking in or looking around or looking down. I was looking up to the only one who could really fix what was broken in my world. And so I encourage anybody that's listening, if you're struggling, especially if you feel heavy-hearted or overwhelmed or sad or depressed, praise. I can't explain it, but there's something about when we just abandon ourselves and lift up our hands and our hearts and we say, God, you are worthy of my worship. It changes our whole demeanor.
And I want to be clear that we're not saying that it's something that should replace if you're on a medication or you're seeing a counselor or any of those things, but it's definitely something you can add to the list of tools that you are doing to combat anxiety. Because if you have clinical anxiety, that is a real thing. And it's certainly okay to be on medication if that's what you need. But we're saying that even if you're on medication or if you're not, this can be something that could actually really be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm not in any way knocking anyone that's struggling and seeing a counselor or taking medication. Do that. Do what will help you to feel better. But this may just give you a little extra jolt every day, a little extra hope, especially if you're having an especially hard day. But I've started doing this now almost every day without fail, and it does change things for me. And I believe it's biblical. And I heard a pastor say one time that when we praise, that Satan is allergic to praise. And so when he hears loud, triumphant praise, he starts moving back. And so if you want him to leave you alone, try praise. Yes.
Oh, I love that. He's allergic to praise. And that is so true. He cannot stand the praises that we give to our God. And it is a powerful thing that we as human beings are probably not going to fully understand until we get to heaven. But it is powerful. And the Lord has given it to us as a gift to fight off the wiles of our foe. And we do have a real adversary that is attacking us in our rest, a gift that God has given us, by the way, is rest. He gave us the Sabbath, a time of rest, the evenings when we're supposed to rest at night in the darkness. Those are gifts to us because he knows how we are formed. He knows the hairs on our head. He knows all the things that we need, including rest.
Yes, he does. And I will tell you a few other things. I've had a few people talk to me about they were having sleepless nights. And so I have some good suggestions for how to go back to sleep. Now, these are all kind of from the spiritual perspective, but I think it's the same idea. I have a friend that laughs. She says, if I start praying, I always go back to sleep. And I've found that sometimes I'll just have a list by the bedside, or I'll go through my family members and I'll just start praying when I can't sleep at night. Another thing I love to do is I love to have a scripture or the words to a song that I just am thinking over during the day. And so I this morning when I was reading in the Psalms, I was reading in Psalm 73 where it says, whom have I in heaven but thee? And besides thee, I desire nothing on this earth. When my strength and my heart fail, he's the strength of my life. And so there's something about knowing when my flesh and my heart fail, he's my strength, that I can go over and over that thought. And that's a way to be encouraged. You can also take the alphabet and go through and just think of characteristics of God and praise him. He's amazing. He's blessed. He's compassionate. He's dear. He's everything. Those are some things you can do when you can't sleep at night. One other thing that I've tried that this has helped, and I will take, once again, music. I love the music. I will turn on like hymns. I'll go to Spotify or one of the music programs and I'll find hymns that are just wordless, like on the piano, but I know the words. And so as they're played, I'll hear my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus and his righteousness, or I'll hear in Christ alone, my hope is found. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. And those songs will just play softly and I'll go back to sleep with that music on. So those are just a few ideas. Is if you're having a hard time sleeping, to have a plan when you wake up in the middle of the night might just bring you some peace if you're struggling with worry. A lot of women do, especially when they hit a certain age.
Yes. And I think sometimes if the enemy is the one that's waking you up to try to torment you, I feel like if I'm praying, then he's going to think twice about waking me up next time.
That's right.
So, what are some other things that people need to know that they can do to experience rest? Because you can't always sleep exactly perfect. And like you said, different ages, hormones show up and that interrupts our sleep. And that's not because we're lacking faith. It's just chemical things that sometimes happen. Sometimes we have like shoulder issues that wake us up in the middle of the night. But how can we experience rest in our spirits and in our minds, even if our bodies aren't resting the way we want them to?
That's a good question. Some of what I've found is what I do during the day that helps. Like I've found that, these are just really practical, that I drink lots of water, that I try to eat more healthy. So I don't eat a lot of junk at night, especially before I go to bed. I try to get in a walk every day. It's amazing how a little movement and a little activity can help you to feel better. I've also found that having time to talk with friends and laugh and have some community really helps with the rest. So you don't feel like you're doing it by yourself. And then often at night, I'll get my journal out. And if I just need to, there'll be something on my mind, something I'm dealing with, and I'll just write it out. And sometimes I'll write it out in bullet points. Sometimes I'll journal it out. But there's something about that pen and that paper, once again, that help. And then if you're really struggling, just to get up and go and you may prayer walk around your house. If you're worried about your children, walk around. Like you said, it's a good time to pray and pray over what's bothering you. If you're struggling in your marriage, if you're hurting physically, and pray over those issues that you're dealing with.
That's so good. I love that you brought out the physical pieces of that because that is important. We are both physical and spiritual people. We're also mental people. So all of those things all work together. They don't work separately. And if we work on all of them, then we'll be more likely to experience the rest that God has for us. I also love that you're encouraging people to do things off screen that are hobbies and fun activities, and not that everything we do that's recreational has to be on a blue light wavelength.
Yes. In fact, we've tried, my husband and I have reached a point where we're trying to be more active. And so we get up, turn the television off, and we've taken up some new hobbies. Like we love to walk and find pretty places to walk. And we love to hike. And that's a good one. My kids got me a bike for Christmas. And so I've been riding inside, trying to build back up, the ability to ride outside. But down the street from our house, they built some new pickleball courts. Pickleball is kind of like ping pong and tennis put together. It's a smaller court. It's made for seniors, but I see every age out there. And it costs very little to play. And so we've started getting out and playing in a league. And it's a lot of fun. You meet people and you get exercise and you get out some of your stress from the day. And so we found that we have to be purposeful. We like to build a big fire pit and get the whole family and sit around the fire pit and talk. No cell phones, unless you want to take a picture. But some of those things are just almost like old fashioned, like going back to what we did before we were so preoccupied with the screen. And so I love dreaming up ways that we can find ways to give ourselves rest that involve our body and our whole self, and not just sitting and looking at something.
Yeah, even art. If you can't get up and get outside because the weather's bad, you can do some arts and crafts and things like that. And that is emotionally very cathartic, and it can be uplifting and fun. So doing art without feeling perfectionistic about the art, of course, just doing it for fun.
That's a great one. I don't do art for fun. I'm not much of an artist, but we will pull out a jigsaw puzzle and our board game. We had an incident where our electricity went out. We have one of those ice storms like we get in the South. We don't get snow, we get ice. And when we get ice, the whole world shuts down. But I remember one particular night, my kids decided we needed to play a game. We had no power. We were eating crackers and cold cuts and anything we could find to eat. And by flashlight, we played Trivial Pursuit. It was hilarious. And we had the best time. We just laughed and laughed because no one had any contraption that would work. No one's devices were powered up. And so it kind of forced us to go back to what we would have done, in the past. And it was a lot of fun just to laugh and play a game with each other. So that's another great thing people can do is find at least one other person and get your board games out and play something together. And it does seem like that rest involves everything. And it's, as women, especially, I don't, when they make the jokes about men and women, they say that we're all kind of, everything's mushed together. We're like spaghetti. It's real hard to separate us into compartments, that we kind of mush it all together as women. But I have found that everything affects my rest. Every relationship, every situation, my health, what I'm thinking about, my work, my ministry. And I think it's the same for all of us. Everything kind of mushes together. And so we need health in all areas of our lives in order to be a healthy person completely, our whole self to be healthy. And I think God made us to be that way. I think of the verse that says he wants us to love us with all our might and all our soul and all our spirit and all our might. And I think to get rest, you need it with all those places. Soul, body, and spirit need to rest.
Any final tips that you want to leave with people about how to just rest?
Well, I think of this is kind of a funny one. I have a sweet senior pastor and his wife in the little church where my husband and I serve. And I asked her one time what she wanted to do when she had a break. She said, I just want to sit. I said, what do you mean? She said, I just want to sit and do nothing. And I think maybe all of us would benefit if we would take even 5 minutes a day and sit and do nothing. So I dare you, all of your listeners, to try what my pastor's wife suggests, to give yourself the freedom to just sit for a few minutes every day and take some deep breaths.
It isn't about being lazy. There's a difference between resting and being lazy. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm reading a little book, and I think it's called Simple Words of Wisdom. It's by a man named Mark DeMoss. He's a friend. He lives in Atlanta. He and his wife, April, and he wrote this book, and he's a PR guy. And he's wrote a whole chapter about giving ourselves freedom to think. He says there's a company. This is amazing. You pay them to think for you. That's what they do. And so he started giving his employees 1 hour a day, catch this, to put their feet up on their desk, take their notepad and their pen out and think. And when I read that, I thought, you know what? All of us need time to think. And it is healthy to give ourselves room to breathe and think and ponder. And it's biblical for us to take the time to ponder and really reflect and think. And so I think that really goes hand in hand with rest. We don't have to be going 100 miles an hour. In fact, there's an old adage my pastor used to say, when you're chopping down trees, you need to take time to stop and sharpen the axe. If you don't take time to sharpen your axe, you can hit the trees like crazy, but they won't chop as easily. And so I think for a lot of us, we don't take time to sharpen the axe. We don't take time to prop our feet up and just think. And so I believe that's a huge part in what I'm trying to do personally and encouraging people to do.
How can people get in touch with you and get a copy of your amazing 90-day journal, Just Rest?
Thank you for asking that, Tina. I'm excited to tell you that you can find me if you can spell my name, which is a challenge. It's Melanie Redd, R-E-D-D. I have a website under that name, and I'm on social media under my name, and the book is on Amazon. You can easily find it, Just Rest, Melanie Redd. And I would love to invite people to connect with me. I tell people, if you'll reach out to me on social media, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Facebook. Let's be friends. Just reach out and tell me that you heard this podcast and you'd like to connect. And I would love to meet your friends and your listeners on social media.
So tell us about your podcast.
Well, it's a brand new effort. It's kind of fun. There's a local ministry here in the Memphis area called Love We're Finding. My pastor for years was a man named Adrian Rogers, and he's in heaven, but his ministry continues on. And last year, his ministry invited me to partner with them and start a podcast. And so it's called Women Living Courageously. And it's some of Adrian Rogers' material and some of mine. And it comes together to encourage women to not be afraid. And it's based on Proverbs 31:25 that says she laughs without fear of the future. And that's our goal, to help women to laugh again and not be so afraid of the future.
I love that so much. I'm so grateful to have you on the show today, Melanie. And I hope that all of you listening will get in touch with her. And if you want to live more courageously and experience more rest, find a way to get in touch with her and listen to her new podcast. And of course, I also hope that you come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant. Flourish-Meant is part of the Spark Media Network and can be found on the Edify app.